So Nate Diaz wants to be let go by the UFC so he can go and fight Jake Paul in a boxing match, and Dana White came out today and said that he doesn't mind that idea whatsoever, and also said that that matchup makes sense for Nate Diaz moving forward. So now this is a real possibility that we could see Nate Diaz versus Jake Paul in a boxing ring in front of everyone watching towards the end of this year or maybe early next year. Who knows? But what was a joke last year of Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz being a possibility is now a reality, and I do believe that Jake Paul would beat Nate Diaz in a boxing match and potentially, and I also believe likely, finish Nate Diaz in a boxing match, and I'm going to tell you why in today's video, but let's break down the news of this first and how this all came about. So Nate Diaz has been angry that the UFC apparently have not been offering him any matchups whatsoever, but in my opinion, I believe this isn't the UFC's fault. I know it's very, very popular to just go against the UFC and say it's them that's doing it and all of this and all of that, but we've seen a bunch of fights in the works for Nate Diaz, a bunch of offers being made about Khamzat Chimaev. Even Luke K was offering to fight him as well. Like, there are so many fights that have been offered to Nate Diaz. There are so many matchups that have been being discussed for Nate Diaz versus someone over the past year or so. And I think it's Nate Diaz turning them all down. The UFC would love to make Kevin Holland versus Nate Diaz. I know they would. Kevin Holland called him out recently and said that he wants to take on Nate Diaz. He changed his Twitter name to I'm Anyone because Nate Diaz said he's so annoyed that he'll literally fight anyone in July or August. Why would the UFC not want to match up Nate Diaz? I don't understand. Fair play, they might not want to put him against Dustin Poirier or a top contender, but they wanted to put him against Khamzat Chimaev to boost Chimaev's name value, of course, but like, I understand why they wouldn't maybe want him interfering in the top-ranked areas of a division, but they would love the idea of a Kevin Holland versus Nate Diaz matchup. But Nate Diaz keeps saying, send a release. I'll fight anyone, he says. Then Kevin Holland, someone, says, I'll fight you. And now it's send the release. I feel as though, as much as people love Nate Diaz, he's a big part of this. I think he knows he's likely not going to win any matchups in the UFC moving forward, especially against some young, hungry up-and-comer or an established top-level guy at the top of the sport. He always has that chance to land a big punch on someone and make something happen in the later rounds when they get tired or bored of beating the living hell out of him. However, I think he's done taking that much damage for small money in the UFC, and I think he really does want to take on Jake Paul in a boxing match. He mentioned it, and Dana White came out and said that that's a fight that makes sense, and Nate Diaz should probably go on and fight Jake Paul. And people are saying, wow, Dana's being so disrespectful. The feeling I got from Dana White's interview was, I am done trying to deal with Nate Diaz. That's what I got. I didn't get it as like, wow, Dana White being so unnecessarily harsh to Nate Diaz for no reason. I kind of got the feeling that Dana White's been trying to make a matchup. They've all been trying to make a matchup with Nate Diaz, and they're sick of him, essentially. Because it was so like, yeah, go and do it. I'm done trying to fight his battles and trying to be nice to him in the media. Like, this is the first time he's like openly came out and insulted a fighter in a very long time, since he hasn't owned a stake in a company for a while as well. So for him to come out and just say, yeah, you should probably go and fight Jake Paul, I think he's just done trying to deal with Nate Diaz. But now let's talk about the matchup between Jake Paul and Nate Diaz, because Jake Paul called him out as well and said that he wouldn't mind that matchup. He also said that he wants to be the last fight on Nate Diaz's contract in the UFC, but that's obviously never going to happen. He's just trying to make a headline there. Nate Diaz wants to be released. I say release him. They're going to make the Jake Paul matchup. If he's not going to fight anyone in the UFC anyway, what's the hold up? We might as well just get other big fights outside of that promotion in boxing. And I do believe that Jake Paul will finish Nate Diaz. And I'm going to tell you why. You can talk about the boxing skill, and we'll talk about that. Like, Nate Diaz has good boxing for MMA, but in terms of like real high level boxing skill, he doesn't have much power. Okay, I'm sure he rocked Leon Edwards when Edwards didn't see the shot coming and was sort of just cruising to a decision win and taking it off and just sort of cruising a fifth round because he knew he'd won the first four. But Jake Paul is learning as a boxer, and he's a big guy, and people really don't consider this because Jake Paul is like, what, 6'1", a tall 6'1". He's like bulked up. I think he's about 200 pounds of muscle. Like he's probably on roids, and that's another factor that we can talk about. But he has been learning boxing straight as a young guy from like, what, 21 to 25, 22 to 25, the last 4 years, the last 3 years, under a great training camp. And he's been dedicating his life to boxing. He's 5-0 as a pro now. He had an amateur fight against Deji. It feels crazy to even mention this in one of my videos, but this is where we're at now in the world. These are the matchups that are going to be made. I think Jake Paul would beat Nate Diaz. Diaz has taken so much damage. He's going to have a massive size disadvantage against Jake Paul as well. He'll probably be 180 pounds come that fight, and Jake Paul will probably make it a catchweight bout because Jake Paul, he doesn't mind paying these guys a lot of money. Jake Paul is a multi-millionaire. He probably has 10 mil in the bank. He makes so much money. So he will pay Nate Diaz 2 million as an investment for his own brand. It's not that he's paying Nate Diaz to try and make a profit on the pay-per-view. Sure, that's a part of it. But he's paying Nate Diaz to say at some point in his life, I KO'd Nate Diaz, in a boxing match. I beat Nate Diaz in a fight. He's investing in his own brand of a person. So for him, this is not like a business negotiating prices and stuff like that. He's given out free Rolexes to Tyron Woodley in the build-up, and that's not a huge matchup. The Nate Diaz fight is a huge matchup for Jake Paul. And there aren't many of them right now. KSI is fighting other people like, what's his name, Wasabi, or something along that line. Like, KSI don't want anything to do with Jake Paul. He'll get finished immediately. Sorry, KSI fans. He just would. It's obvious he fights like an absolute... I'm not going to say that word. He fights so dumb, I'd sleep KSI in a boxing match. No, and I shouldn't even get called an ego guy for saying that. He can't box for anything. So, Jake Paul, Nate Diaz. Jake Paul controls everything. Not only might he have a more developed boxing game at this point in his career because he's got another 6 months since December where he KO'd Tyron Woodley badly, finished him by brutal KO. But also, that's another 6 months since then that he's got to train his hands and be even better. And when you're that young in the game of boxing, the main thing you're trying to do is take what you're doing in the gym into the ring. You know what I mean? Like, you're doing something in sparring. He probably looks way better in sparring than he does on fight night. And the main thing with experience, it isn't really what you're learning in a gym. You know what you're supposed to do in a gym. You know what technique you're supposed to have, what footwork you're supposed to have. Of course, some intricate stuff at certain levels is going to get developed in a gym as well. It's being able to translate that over onto fight night. And that's what Jake Paul's been getting better and better at. Fighting in front of massive crowds that he didn't really do before because he fought under the... he had an amateur fight at the start of his career in front of a big crowd. It was his first time. He looked really bad against Deji. Then he came back and fought in front of no crowd whatsoever against Nate Robinson and all these other guys. And now he's finally back in front of a crowd in his last fight against Tyron Woodley. So he's building this experience, performing under the bright lights. And I think he puts away Diaz because here's another thing. People are going to talk about what happens if it goes into the later rounds. Jake Paul looked like he was gassing out against Tyron Woodley. Jake Paul controls everything. He controls everything. And if he pays Nate Diaz 2 million, is Nate Diaz really going to say no because it's only a 4-round fight or only a 6-round fight? Jake Paul controls everything. We're doing it for 6 rounds. We're doing it for 4 rounds. He can just do that. It's his promotion. It's his promotion. He can just take roids. No drug testing for this one. I'm taking roids to fight Nate Diaz. And Diaz is so against that. People will really notice if Nate Diaz starts taking roids. He's vegan, for Christ's sake. Softest body you'll ever see in the UFC. If Nate Diaz starts roiding up, his fans are going to notice. And they're probably going to turn on him a little bit as well. Jake Paul can just take roids, lower the amount of rounds, mess up Nate Diaz's fight week schedule, all of this kind of stuff. Like, he's in full control of every matchup he has. Especially when you're some MMA fighter coming in for your first boxing match. Fair play when you're Tommy Fury and you've got an infrastructure around you of managers and his coaches know the tricks of the game and all of that, and they've got their own guys. They trained Tyson Fury to come in and be a heavyweight world champion. They've got like the history in the sport to where they can have some bargaining power over the matches and stuff like that and how it's going to be, how many rounds. But when you're new to the sport and you don't know anyone in the business really, but you're manager for MMA, Jake Paul's just going to say, here's 2 million, 4 rounds. Oh, by the way, I don't even care if I tell you, I'm taking roids. I'm going to be on all the HGH. I'm literally going to drain Usman and put it all inside of me. Okay? He's going to run up to Usman, drag out a needle, stick it in his traps, drag out all of that HGH and TRT, and stick it in his own trap, and just juice up and become Jake the Nigerian Nightmare Paul. And he'll just beat Nate Diaz. Juiced up, 4 rounds, 6 rounds, another 6 months of training of boxing that he's going to be getting better at. He's bigger than Nate Diaz, and he'll just finish him. He'll just finish him, and it'll be a big build-up, and it'll sell a lot of money, and it'll make a lot of money for Jake Paul. It'll sell a lot of pay-per-views, and it'll be a huge fight for Jake Paul, and he doesn't mind forking out 2 million or 1.5 million, or even $1 million plus like 10% pay-per-view shares, or hey, 500,000 plus you get 15% of the pay-per-view share. He doesn't mind doing that for Nate Diaz because it all benefits him anyway. Just getting Nate Diaz in there with him, where he controls the rounds, he controls the glove size, he controls the training camp, how long Nate Diaz has to prepare, he controls the roids that he can use, even. He's going to pay him as much as he wants to. Because if he can make sure it's a guaranteed win and perform on the night and not get shaky and look bad and all of a sudden lose, if any case there's a rematch, he can put a rematch clause in. Oh, I lost to Nate Diaz, rematch. Ka-ching. Another 1 million pay-per-views. Another 500,000 pay-per-views. Another few $1 million that I'm going to make. It's just all in his favour. And I rate Conor McGregor so highly. People don't give McGregor enough credit, man. Like, I'll save this till the end of the video. I think Jake Paul's probably going to finish Nate Diaz with like TKO standing. He controls the ref. Hey, ref, when Ben Askren gets back up after I knock him down, it doesn't matter if he's just walking towards you like this. Call off the fight. He was already celebrating. It's done. It's over. I've won. Ben Askren's back up, like walking towards the ref. Fair enough in a weird stance, but in any other boxing match, that would have been allowed to go on. But what do you know? The referee stops it when it's Jake Paul's matchup. Ben Askren gets back up. Who cares? Stop the fight. It's over. As soon as I knock him down. Jake Paul just has to knock down Nate Diaz or land a flurry of shots and rock him, and he can get like an early standing TKO. And people don't really care about early stoppages. People will complain, but at the end of the day, if you've got put down by Jake Paul and knocked down, or you've been rocked and beaten up a bit against the ropes, they're going to see that as what it is. You getting beaten in a boxing match. There's so much in his favour. And I rate Conor McGregor, man. Because he could very easily just take that fight and be the guy to try and beat Jake Paul and entertain that idea. And I think he came out recently and said, you know, we'll see. Or something like that in an interview. But he was just being a bit like flippant in an interview. He never really put any real words behind it. He ignored him another time when he got caught with his like crutches coming out of somewhere, and he said, is that Arnie's car? Or something like that. He just talked about Arnold Schwarzenegger's car. Very careful pronunciation of that surname. He just talked about his car or something like that and just ignored the question completely. I rate that, man. The guy wants to fight Oliveira, Usman, all these top-level names in the UFC. He could fight Jake Paul, but why? It's so stacked for him to win. You shouldn't even respect him as a combat sports athlete anyway. Where's your martial code of a combat sports guy? Jesus Christ, whatever though. They're going to do it, and Jake Paul's going to beat Nate Diaz, and he's going to call out Conor McGregor, and he's going to call out Masvidal, and it's just going to keep fucking going, you idiots, man. Just anything for a paycheck, I guess. Sad. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Jake Paul, second round finish, body shot, headshots, standing TKO after knocking down Nate once. Off balance, maybe. Goodbye.